Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we talk about the Assyrians. The Assyrians are the great successor. They're the winners of the Bronze Age collapse. Not because they were one of the Bronze Age collapse conquerors, but instead because they got themselves back together. They're a Mesopotamian people who were able to reorganize themselves out of the chaos and create this giant empire. Now, what the Bronze Age collapse did was wreck the two killer whales out there. Actually, the three killer whales out there. The Hittites, the Babylonians, and the Egyptians. And the Assyrians are poor nobodies on the upper Tigris, which meant they were between Babylon and the Hittites. That's a bad place to be if those two guys are strong fighting each other. But when they're weak because of the Bronze Age collapse, now you can grow because you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not bumping into anybody. You have room, you have time. So the Bronze Age collapse was a trauma. Why was it a trauma? Because everybody who was on the move wanted to go and wreck Babylon because that was the richest place. Hey, you need money? Go to Babylon. Also, the Hittites were pretty rich because of all of their mineral wealth. So wreck them. And here are the Assyrians in between them. So basically, they were on the highway. They're AC/DC, right? They're on the highway to hell. People who went and attacked the Hittites then came down the rivers to wreck Babylon. And they came right through Assyria. And so the idea was to never let this happen again. For the Assyrians, we can't be invaded. This is the Egyptian New Kingdom response to trauma. We can't be invaded. And so their answer was to build an army that cannot lose. That was the idea. We will build an army that nobody can defeat. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to build a society that can build an army that cannot lose. And so what the Assyrians do is make all Assyrian men soldiers. They're not going to be farmers anymore. They're not going to be craftsmen. They're not going to be blacksmiths. They're going to be warriors. They're going to be soldiers. This is our first time we'll see this, but it won't be our last. The Spartans will do this. For example, the Mongols are like this. Though the Mongols have the asterisk of being a nomadic peoples. But the idea is all men are soldiers. What's the problem? The problem is, one, this is immensely expensive. This is why no one else does this. And two, who's going to make your food? Who's going to make your stuff? You still need horseshoes. You still need, I don't know, all this stuff, clothes. You still need stuff to be made. And if your people aren't doing it, who's doing it? And this is why people don't do this. They don't make warrior societies. You know, the Spartans do, the Nazis do. And there's an argument that the Nazis really don't. They come close, or they think about it, or they make movements towards it. But the idea is you can't. It's hard to do. And so their answer is conquer everybody. Turn them into slaves. That's the answer. You turn them into slaves and you make them give you their food. And they work for you, making horseshoes or needles or clothes or whatever you need. You force other people to work for the Assyrians in order to pay the army. Now, what does this mean? This means unending war. This is the Nazis. In fact, I make an argument, and I know there are probably Assyrian historians who will argue with this, but the Assyrian Empire is what happens if the Nazis win. Have you ever had a question about what would happen if the Nazis won? Look at the Assyrian Empire, because they're basically the baddies who win. And so their idea was conquer everybody. foreign slaves who are going to work for the Assyrians and pay the army. But that means you have to conquer everybody, because when you conquer one people, you loot all their money, right? You pay off your army. They're very happy. But then you're going to run out of money, so you got to go conquer somebody else. And you got to go conquer somebody else. And every new conquest has to pay for the last conquest. Do you see how this works? Because armies are expensive. They're the most expensive things humans have ever invented. What is the result of this? The result is that the Assyrian army is better than everybody else. It can do things no other army can do on the battlefield. And this is seen in its use of what's called combined arms. Combined arms, C-O-M-B-I-N-E-D, combined arms, AMS. It means the complementary use of multiple fighting types and styles. For the Assyrians, it was chariots working with archers, working with infantry. Now you may go, well, that's obvious. No, it's not obvious, because each of those things does a different job. And each of those guys are trained to do their job differently. It's like having the Air Force, the Marines, and the Navy all working together, which we do. This is a modern way of fighting. This is not Hammurabi showing up at the front of 20,000 men and saying, charge. This is all of your pieces working together for the same common goal on the battlefield. That takes training. That takes discipline. That takes a commander-in-chief on the battlefield who knows how to use these pieces. It takes officers to command troops on the battlefield who are loyal to the king, who know their jobs. This army is more professional than anybody else. It is able to do things on the battlefield. Literally, people would be on the battlefield looking at the chariots moving, sweeping to the left, while the infantry is moving to the right and going, oh, we can't do that. It's like a high school football team versus a professional team. You know, you watch a professional team play the wishbone, run off tackle, and everyone starts moving together. The high school team can't do that. They don't have the experience. They don't have the skill. And so the Assyrians, because of combined arms, which is a modern way of fighting, modern armies fight this way. They are more professional than anybody else, which means victory. It means empire. It means wealth. It means they don't lose. They are able to defeat anybody. Even Babylon and Egypt, who are bigger than they are. Remember, the Assyrians all have a warrior society. They're not having a lot of babies. Their men are warriors. They're not hanging out at home with doing lovey-dovey stuff. The Spartans too. And so you have this empire and this wealth. So, okay, so they win. Great, they conquer people. They conquer Babylon. They conquer Samaria. They conquer Phoenicia. They conquer Canaan. They conquer Egypt. Okay, they are the first people to unite the Middle East of all three parts. Babylon, the Hittites, and the Egyptians. Babylon, Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, and Egypt. They're the first people to combine the three into one empire. Great. How do they run it? This empire of 30 million people. This empire of so many different languages. The Hebrews call it Babel. They have 10 million Egyptians who don't want to be ruled by a foreigner. How do you do this? And the answer is terrorism. They invent what we call state-sponsored terrorism. This is the total destruction of armies, and that is a new kind of violence. Nobody destroyed armies before. Ramses is the greatest king of his age. He doesn't obliterate an army. He doesn't want to murder all those people. Those people are going to pay taxes to him. Those people are going to be loyal to him. Those people might even fight for him in the future. He doesn't want to murder them. The Assyrians don't care. If you're not Assyrian, they don't care. And so they murder you. The idea being, don't ever fight against us. If you revolt, we will murder you. The Romans will do the same thing. Now, the Romans are nicer about it. But if you piss the Romans off, ask the Hebrews. They obliterate Jerusalem. We're going to talk about that in a second. They obliterate Jerusalem. They picked up the 10 million or so Hebrews and scattered them throughout the empire, hoping that they would disappear like dust in the wind. Like, that's what the Romans could do. Well, that's what the Assyrians did. So you destroy the entire army. You murder all the people you fight against. And remember, they could, because they were better on the battlefield than anybody else. And then you commit violence against settled people. You rip down their walls. You murder their people. You cut off their gods. You kill their children. And you scare them into submission. You say, don't make me come back. Now, the Mongols will say that later on in the 1200s. They scare people into submission. Because then, once they've done that, if someone else, the next town over, they turn to them and say, do you want some? And that is exactly what happens to the Hebrews. In 725, they roll into Israel, the northern Hebrew kingdom, and obliterate it. They liquidate it. They rip everything. The archaeological record goes from a vibrant Jewish Hebrew society to the moon, to nothing. You would think nobody ever lived there. That's what the Assyrians did. They picked those people up, they moved them away, they disappeared, and then they picked up other people and they plopped them into what used to be Israel, into what used to be the Hebrew kingdom, and they called them, they said, you are now living here. That's what the Assyrians could do. And then they went to Judah, the southern Hebrew kingdom, the weaker kingdom, the more isolated one, the more conservative one, and they roll in 707, and they say, you want a piece of us? They lay siege to Jerusalem, and they go, you know what we did to your cousins? They don't exist anymore. They're gone. They've disappeared. They're the 10 lost tribes. You're going to tell stories about how traumatic it was to watch your cousins gone. Here today, gone tomorrow. That's us. So you want a piece of us? And the Hebrews and Judah are like, no, I don't want no. And they're like, you're going to pay us, right? Yeah. And if you revolt, we're going to kill you. Well, we're never going to revolt. Never, ever, ever. You're in charge. Yeah, that's right. And the Assyrians leave because the Judeans don't want any part of it. They watched what happened to their cousins who died in a genocide. And they're like, pay them. Make them go away. Do whatever it takes for us to survive. And the Assyrians like, we're going to tell you what to do, or we're going to kill you. And the Judeans like, okay, we'll do whatever you want. Can we worship our one God? And the Assyrians laugh and be like, oh, yeah, sure, you can worship your one God. He hasn't helped you now, has he? No, well, maybe. Well, we're going to have a philosophical argument about that. Well, we don't need to talk about this right now. We got our God. It's okay. We're cool. Thank you, Sennacherib. We're cool. All right. Don't make me come back here. We won't. They sack Babylon. They commit a genocide in Israel, which is maybe 85% of the Hebrews. It's 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. They build Nineveh and a great library. They build a giant city. Why? Because the Assyrians don't have a city. And there's Babylon. And remember, it's humiliating to everybody else that you need a Babylon. If you think you're tough, everybody who you beat up will go, yeah, but where's your Babylon? Where's your city? The only people who don't have to deal with that is the Egyptians. Why? They got the Nile and freaking pyramids. So they know they're awesome. Like, being Egyptian comes with confidence. Because you roll into Egypt and you're like, yeah, we're tough. You're like, yeah, you have those things? Like, yeah, no, we're not going to build a 1,000-year-old pyramid. It's just not going to happen. All right, you're awesome. I get it, but we still kicked your ass. And Egyptians are like, yeah, all right, we'll see what happens in 5 years. And they give a shrug emoji, and we'll talk about it later. But everybody else is like, where's your city? Where's your city? Where's your city? Where's your Babylon? And so if you want to be tough, if you want to be taken seriously in Mesopotamia, you need a big-ass city. David built Jerusalem. Hammurabi's got Babylon. You got Ur and Uruk. And so what did the Assyrians build? They built Nineveh. And how did they build it? With slaves. to show off their power. They're like, you people are going to build us a great city. This is like what the Nazis wanted to do with Berlin. They were going to level Berlin, build Berlin as like a new classical Rome, and use slave labor from all over Europe to do it. They weren't going to pay Germans. Germans were in the army. They were going to take millions of Slavs, millions of Jews, and millions of other peoples and force them to build a new Berlin. Well, that's exactly what the Assyrians did. They took millions of people as slaves and forced them to build the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. The Assyrians weren't going to build it. And then they built in Nineveh a great library where they stored everyone else's knowledge. Because remember, the Assyrians are warriors. They're not poets. They're not scientists. They're warriors. They don't have time for that stuff. So when they roll into other people, they murder the people, they take the books. Then they store it. Now you go, why? Are they going to read? Are they going to become the smartest people on earth? No. It's power. You have to now ask the Assyrians permission. The Great Library is a way of exerting power. You have to come up to Nineveh. You have to say, can I please read my books? And what can the Assyrians say? They can say, yes, you're a great ally. You're weak. You never revolt. Sure, read your book. Or they could say, fork off. We're closed for the next 3 months. Go away. Why? Because they can. Because they have power. So here's a little section from what the Assyrians said about themselves in terms of state-sponsored terrorism. Sennacherib writing about himself. Now remember, this is him writing about himself. This is what he wants people to know about him. At the command of the god Ashur, the great lord, I rushed upon the enemy like the approach of a hurricane. All right, he's not a weakling. He's a freaking hurricane. I put them to rout and turned them back. I transfixed the troops of the enemy with javelins and arrows. What does that mean? Transfix means I shot them with so many arrows, with so much force, they were stuck to the earth. They couldn't move. That's not, I hit them with an arrow. Transfixed means I hit them and they couldn't move anymore. They were stuck to the earth. Habandu Dasha, the commander of the king of Elam. Now here you have to know what Elam is. Elam is the mountains of what today is Iran and Persia. It's a kingdom to the north of the Tigris in the mountain regions. It becomes part of Persia. This is like 500 miles downriver and into the mountains. Like, you want to go fight the king of Elam? You have to be serious about it. It's like invading Egypt. You have to get an army that is capable of fighting in mountain terrain. On the plateau of on what's called the Iranian plateau, you got to cross mountains. You got to come up onto the plateau. You don't have to fight in the open space. That's completely different than fighting in Mesopotamia. Completely different. And yet he's going to go there. This means he's serious about who he's fighting. He's Ramses-like serious. The commander of the king of Elam, together with his nobles, I cut their throats like sheep. Why does that matter? Well, because these people did not eat food wrapped in plastic. They knew what cutting a sheep's throat to eat it looked like. They knew what the terror on the sheep was. They knew what happened once you did it and waited for it to die. So he's using an analogy other people understand. Like, it sounds terrible to me, but I've never seen a sheep butchered. These people did. They did it on a daily basis. So when he says, it's like the equivalent of someone today saying, I crushed them like an ant. I know what that looks like. I know the little splatter that's left. I squeeze them like a spider. Like, I know what that's like. Because I've done it myself. I've killed a spider. I crushed it. I heard it pop. And I went, ooh, that's harsh. But I understand that. These people would have understood the terror the sheep would have when you're butchering the sheep. As you're killing the sheep to eat them. So I cut their throats like sheep, my prancing steeds, trained to harness, which means he's got horses and they're trained. They're war horses. Plunged into their welling blood, meaning these people are hurt, but they're still alive. Welling means their heart is still pumping. Blood is coming out of them. They're not dead. So he's going to roll over them They're plunged into their willing blood as into a river. The wheels of my battle chariot were besplattered with blood and filth. The blood that had been pumping in their veins, and the filth meaning their intestines, the food that they had eaten over the last couple of days. So he's rolling over these people, and they're coming apart. I filled the plain with corpses of their warriors like herbage. Meaning, when you looked at the field from afar, and if you ever see the Matthew Brady photographs of like Antietam, you may have the same reaction. If you looked at the field, it looks like a farm with cabbages and lettuces and little things and vegetables. It's when you get close, you realize all those things that look like fruits and vegetables and roots are actually pieces of people. That they've been so torn apart, they look like a farm of dead people. That's what Sennacherib, Sennachierib, Sennacherib. That's what he wanted people to know about himself. What is the advantage of this? The advantage is people are too scared to revolt, so you get legitimacy. When you say, I'm in charge, they say, yes, 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 yes. The Judeans don't revolt against the Assyrians. That's insane. That's an insane proposition. Nobody's even suggesting it. So, legitimacy. The Assyrians get to run their empire the way they want to run their empire because nobody can stand up to them. Nobody's confident enough to fight them. They're too scared. The disadvantage is everybody hates you. They're just waiting for a chance to revolt against you. They hate you. And I don't mean like they dislike you and they wish someone else was king. They hate you in their guts. They will stab you, your children, your children's children. They hate you. As Thucydides, I think it's Thucydides, says about the Helots, Helots, the Helots, the slaves of the Spartans. The Helots would eat the Spartans raw if they could. That's the hatred. But what we have is a stable system. What we have is a homeostatic system. The Assyrians are too tough for anyone to revolt against, for anyone to beat up. And as long as nothing changes, the Assyrians will stay on top. This is self-regulating homeostatic system. Okay, as long as nothing changes, the Assyrians are going to run the world forever. So guess what happens? Something changes. And what happens is nomadic horse people show up. Didn't I tell you this was going to happen? Didn't I tell you sooner or later nomadic horse peoples always show up and wreck things? Well, nomadic horse peoples, two groups, the Medes and their little cousins, the Persians, come rolling into the Middle East. They cross the Caucasus Mountains from what is today the Ukraine. They cross the Caucasus Mountains, they enter into the Middle East, and they show up and they do what nomads always do. We're here. Who has the food? Who's tough? And all the people go, hey, the Assyrians have all the stuff, and we'll help you get it. And so everyone revolts, led by Babylon. Babylon's like, here's money for you, and here's money for you. Who needs money? We're revolting. Who needs swords? I got swords. Who wants crossbows? I got crossbows. You get a war. You get a war. You get a war. You get a war. Everybody gets a war against Assyria. And so with these new Medes and Persians, now the Medes and Persians actually have an advantage because they're nomadic horse people and they ride horses. They're cavalry. They're not in chariots, which means their horses can go places chariots can't go. Chariots need flat land. Horses can go anywhere. And so the Medes, their cousins, the Persians, now Babylon and everybody else revolts. And what happens is the Assyrian Empire collapses. And in the Battle of Nineveh at 612, right, everything's collapsing. It's again like the Nazis. They're losing their empire. Until just the capital is left. And in 612, you get the Battle of Nineveh, which is the total destruction of the Assyrians. The best example I have in art is the Battle of Minas Tirith in The Return of the King from Lord of the Rings. But you have to understand, in the movie, The bad guys are on the outside trying to get into the city full of the good guys. But in history, in the Battle of Nineveh, the good guys are on the outside and the bad guys, the Nazis, are on the inside. And so what happens is they lay siege this entire international army. You got Medes and Persians and Babylonians and Sumerians and Urites and Hittites. Well, not Hittites anymore, the Neo-Hittites. You got Phoenicians and yeah, even Judeans are there. And you have Egyptians being like the third or fourth largest contingent. And everybody, this international army is there. They're banging on the walls. They tear down a wall. They tear into the hole. They break into the city. And then they're fighting street by street by street by street. The Assyrian king lights himself on fire and throws himself off the tallest temple. It is a bloodbath, but it's the Battle of Berlin. It is every street because the Assyrians know these people are going to kill us. We cannot surrender. And so they're still skilled. They're still good at war, but they're now in a city. They can't spread out. They can't use their tactics. And so there's just this grind and grind and grind. And the Assyrians are destroyed to the last man. There are people who claim to be Assyrian today who say, I am Assyrian. They're not these Assyrians. These Assyrians are gone. They're obliterated. Anybody who wasn't murdered, and it's most people, are turned into slaves. They're gone. The Assyrians of the Assyrian Empire disappear. They're gone. Xenophon comes across Nineveh with his 10,000 Greek troops. This is Xenophon is a Greek soldier. This is the end of the Persian Empire. A Greek army is marching through the Persian Empire, and they come across this giant ruin, like it's Dungeons and Dragons, and it's this city that he calls the City of Giants. Giants must have built this city, and it's a city of ghosts and dogs. There's nothing there, and they go to the local farmers and say, "What giants built this city?" And the local farmers are like, "I don't know. It's fucking been ruins forever. I don't know." And it's like this giant mystery. That's the Assyrians. That's Nineveh. It's a ghost town. It's abandoned. That's how much hatred the people had for the Assyrians. Now, what does this lead to? 75 years of warfare. Because now who's going to replace the Assyrians? The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, a new group, the Lydians, who are going to replace the Hittites. Who? And the answer is, after 75 years of warfare, Egypt versus the Medes versus the Babylonians, the Persians. It is the little cousin who will end up conquering Iran, Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, Egypt, Phoenicia, Cana, Afghanistan, and India. It is the Persians who will create the largest empire of the Mesopotamian world. And that's who we'll pick up with in our next episode. Thank you.